The virus is the perfect example. It is purely an information problem that is disguised as a medical problem because that's the outcome of not having the right information. But watch our information acquisition process. 7 billion human beings all on the same path in terms of the same objective, at least those that are paying attention. Each of them have, hands and eyes and ears and brains, and they're all like little sensors. And all of those sensors in the form of human beings all over the world are sensing their world, and they're absorbing information at an incredible rate and filtering it and finding out what's good. So the information that it would take to defeat the virus is moving very quickly, but the nature of it is you don't see the impact until it reaches some critical mass. The more I say this, the more this is going to be a filter you're going to want to look at. Long before the coronavirus, I had told you that we were approaching the golden age. Doesn't feel like it today. But we were approaching the golden age because we no longer had material shortages. And that all of our problems that were remaining were information problems in disguise. In other words, if you had enough information, you could solve it. The virus is the perfect example. It is purely an information problem that is disguised as a medical problem because that's the outcome of not having the right information. But watch our information acquisition process. 7 billion human beings all on the same path in terms of the same objective, at least those that are paying attention. Each of them have, hands and eyes and ears and brains, and they're all like little sensors. And all of those sensors in the form of human beings all over the world are sensing their world, and they're absorbing information at an incredible rate and filtering it and finding out what's good. So the information that it would take to defeat the virus is moving very quickly, but the nature of it is you don't see the impact until it reaches some critical mass. So imagine, if you will, that our information went from nothing, fog of war, if we had information it was more likely wrong than right, to something much bigger. And we're sort of here right now. We need to get here, something like multiple of that. But the rate at which we're going, that's not going to take long. So the testing kits, for example, are information gathering. The knowledge of what worked and what didn't is information. The knowledge of how to, change a ventilator so it helps 4 people, the information of how to operate it if we need more people is information. Even starting up these little wartime factories to rapidly build medical equipment, I'll bet that's almost entirely an information problem in terms of how long it takes. Because in an emergency, you get rid of, the obstacles. So you got the money, everybody's on the same page, you're going to, skip some steps of approval and stuff like that. But imagine you don't have that friction. You're trying to build an emergency factory and there's no friction of complaints or policies or programs. It's all been wiped away. What's left? What is the obstacle that's left? It's pure information. Because if everybody who was involved in the project suddenly could magically know exactly what to do, and here's the important part, when? In other words, they would only drive to the site just as the site was ready for that exact piece. That'd be an information solution. So information ultimately is how we beat all these things. It gets translated into technique and strategy and weapons against it. And our information is increasing insanely. There's a story out of Israel, that Israel, and I know what you're going to think about this before I say it, but Israel is apparently tracking every resident's phone location and knows a record of where it's been. And they're crunching those numbers so they can find out if somebody is identified to have it, they can actually reverse the history and find out all the people who had cell phones that were standing within infection distance, and they send them a text message and say, "Are you coughing? because you stood next to somebody who was infected. Maybe you should stay away from people for a little while. Now, that's what can be done. Now, do you think that other countries couldn't do that? No, of course they could. I mean, the more advanced countries would be better at it. But yeah, every part of that is well within the quite doable range. Now, if you're wondering, how is that possible? The phone companies already have a record all the time of where you are with your phone. They just don't share it. But it's an emergency. So apparently in Israel, they shared it. I don't know their situation with their phones over there. So, how do you feel now? Right? Because under normal circumstances, the public would say, no effing way. You are not going to track me everywhere I go. But in an emergency, if it's the difference between, crashing the economy and not, would you allow the government to track you? Let's say for 3 months. Now, of course, you're all cynics and you say, Scott, if we let them do it temporarily, they will build the capability and then they'll just do it permanently. To which I say, what reality are you living in? They already have the capability. Do I know that? No, of course not. It would be a state secret if anything like that were happening. But do you think there's any chance that the countries who can do it are not looking into it, right? Because now that Israel's announced it, the cat's out of the bag, people can react to that, we can see how people react to that, etc. So I tweeted when I saw the story about the Israel situation, I said in public in a tweet that I give permission to the United States government to track my phone for the duration of the crisis. Now, of course, they don't need my permission, right? That's what an emergency is. There's no point in having an emergency if they have to get my permission to do something. They just need to do what they need to do. But it's got to make it easier. It's got to make, at least it more possible if citizens say, under every other condition, no way. Under this condition, go for it. But, check in again in 3 months. Because, you need a hard stop on this in 3 months. Maybe you need a federal judge or something appointed just to make sure it gets shut down at some point. You could take care of it. These are the kinds of things that could be fixed.